Can a heart forged in darkness ever learn to beat for the light? Can a king of shadows, a man whose currency is fear, truly be saved by a love he claimed as a debt? This is the story of such a man, and the woman who became his salvation, his obsession, and his most dangerous vulnerability. The city was Marco Bellini's chessboard, and he its undisputed king. Known only as the Shadow in the hushed whispers of the underworld, he moved his pieces with cold, strategic precision. His empire was built on loyalty harder than steel and betrayals buried deeper than forgotten graves. One rain-slicked night, while surveying his domain from the tinted window of his armored sedan, a splash of color in a grimy alley snagged his attention. A discarded crimson scarf, clinging to the shoulder of a woman curled atop a mound of black refuse bags. She was sleeping or trying to, using a bundle of newspapers as a pillow. Any other man would have seen a vagrant, a piece of the city's unfortunate refuse. Marco saw an anomaly. He ordered the car to a halt, his loyal consigliere Giovanni murmuring a quiet protest. But the Shadow answered to no one. He stepped out, the fine leather of his shoes silent on the wet pavement. Up close she was a fallen masterpiece. Her face, smudged with soot, held an aristocratic delicacy. Long dark lashes rested on high cheekbones, and her lips, though pale, were perfectly bowed. Around her neck on a tarnished silver chain hung a small familiar locket. Marco's blood ran cold. He recognized the crest etched into its surface, the soaring falcon of the Ricci family. Alberto Ricci, a bookkeeper for a rival family he'd absorbed. A man who had vanished 2 weeks ago along with $1 million of Marco's money. This, then, was the collateral Alberto had left behind. His daughter, Isabella. Marco felt a possessive fire ignite in his chest, a feeling so primal it startled him. He didn't just want his money back. He wanted her. He scooped her into his arms. She was lighter than he expected, a fragile weight against the unyielding muscle of his chest. She stirred, a soft whimper escaping her lips, and instinctively burrowed closer to his warmth. The scent of rain and despair clung to her, but beneath it something else. Something like jasmine and defiance. Giovanni, Marco's voice was a low growl. Prepare the master suite. We have a guest. Isabella awoke to the bewildering sensation of silk against her skin, and the scent of lemons and old money. She was in a bed the size of her entire former bedroom, beneath a ceiling painted with cherubs and golden filigree. Panic seized her. The last thing she remembered was the cold, damp alley, the gnawing hunger, and the crushing weight of her father's final desperate words. Run, mia cara. Don't let them find you. A man stood by the window, a silhouette against the morning sun, his presence filling the cavernous room. He turned and her breath caught. He was brutally handsome, with eyes the color of storm clouds and a jaw that looked carved from granite. A faint scar traced the line of his cheek, a flaw that only enhanced his dangerous perfection. You are Isabella Ricci, he stated, his voice a deep baritone that vibrated through her. I am Marco Bellini. And you, Signorina, are now my property. Her fear was instantly incinerated by a blaze of fury. I am no one's property, she shot back, sitting up, the silk sheet pooling around her waist. Your father thought otherwise, Marco said, taking a slow step toward her. He stole a significant sum from me. He has disappeared. The debt falls to you. He stopped at the foot of the bed, his gaze sweeping over her, an appraisal that was both insulting and intoxicating. I am not a sack of coins you can collect. No, he agreed, a slow, predatory smile touching his lips. You are infinitely more valuable. Thus began her life in the gilded cage. She was adorned in designer gowns, her throat encircled by diamonds that felt heavier than shackles. Every meal was a feast, every room a work of art, but every door was locked, every window watched. She was Marco's beautiful, defiant bird, and he was her captivated, ruthless jailer. Their days were a war of attrition. She met his cold commands with fiery silence, his possessive stares with icy disdain. You cannot break me, she told him one evening, standing on a balcony that overlooked the glittering city lights, a city that was his. I am not trying to break you, Isabella, he murmured, his voice close to her ear, sending an unwanted shiver down her spine. I am trying to understand you. His underboss, a weaselly cousin named Luca Vario, watched their dynamic with greedy eyes. He saw Marco's fascination not as strength, but as a fatal crack in the armor of the shadow. She is a distraction, Marco, Luca would say, his tone dripping with false concern. A liability. The other families are talking. Marco would simply dismiss him with a wave of his hand, his gaze never leaving Isabella. Giovanni, ever the voice of reason, was more direct. This is unwise, my friend. Love is more dangerous than a bullet in our world. It offers a target. Marco's only response was a grim tightening of his jaw. He knew they were right, but he was powerless against the pull she had on him. This innocent girl with the spirit of a warrior. The first crack in her own resolve came a week later. It was late. The villa was quiet. An explosion of glass and splintering which shattered the peace. An ambush. Rival assassins had breached the perimeter. Marco moved with lethal grace, a phantom of violence in the dim light. Isabella, frozen in her doorway, watched him disarm one man and disable another with brutal efficiency. When it was over, and the intruders were being dragged away by his guards, she saw the dark stain spreading across the sleeve of his white shirt. He was bleeding. He looked at her then, his chest heaving, his eyes blazing with the adrenaline of the fight. He expected her to cower, to scream. Instead, she walked toward him. "You're hurt," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. Before he could stop her, she reached out, her fingers gently probing the gash on his bicep. Her touch was a spark on his skin, a jolt to his soul. He flinched, not from pain, but from the unprecedented tenderness of the gesture. In that moment, surrounded by the wreckage of his violent life, this captive, this pawn, showed him a compassion he hadn't known in decades. He saw past the debt, past the defiance, and saw the woman. A fierce, protective instinct roared to life within him, so potent it was terrifying. He would let the world burn before he let anyone harm her. Later, in the sterile silence of his study as she cleaned the wound with a steady hand, he finally asked the question that had been tormenting him. Why? Why didn't you run when you had the chance? You could have escaped in the chaos. Her hand stilled. She looked up, her large, expressive eyes locking with his. They were filled with a sorrow so deep it seemed bottomless. "Because my father taught me you never leave a person to bleed alone," she said softly. No matter who they are. A heavy silence fell between them, thick with unspoken emotions. Then she took a shaky breath, and the truth she'd been hiding finally spilled out. "And because I had nowhere left to run," he frowned, confused. "What do you mean?" She pulled away, wrapping her arms around herself. "You think I was on the street because my father abandoned me with his debt? No. We were together. He didn't just steal money from you, Marco. He stole your ledgers. The real ones." Marco's blood turned to ice in his veins. The ledgers were his sanctum sanctorum, detailing every transaction, every alliance, every betrayal. They were the key to his entire empire. "He was going to the Betrayal," Isabella whispered, tears finally tracing paths through the grime on her cheeks. "He was terrified. He said someone in your inner circle had discovered his plan. He said a traitor was coming for us both. That night in the alley they came. Men in black cars. My father, he pushed me into the trash behind the dumpsters. He told me to stay hidden to survive. Then I heard the shouts. A gunshot. And then silence." She looked at him, her gaze raw and pleading. "I wasn't sleeping on trash to survive. I was hiding from a murderer from your family. My father is dead, Marco. And your traitor killed him." Marco was speechless. The world tilted on its axis. This entire time he'd seen her as payment for a simple theft, a matter of honor and finance. But it was a coup. A viper was coiled in the heart of his organization, and this girl, this beautiful broken girl, was the only one who knew it. His possession had just become his only ally. His obsession had become his only hope. The revelation transformed everything. Isabella was no longer a captive, she was a key. Marco's hunt for his $1 million became a hunt for the serpent in his own garden. He brought her into his private study, a room no outsider had ever entered. The walls were lined with books, not on finance but on history, philosophy, and war. Here, surrounded by the minds of forgotten kings and generals, they began to talk. Not as captor and captive, but as two people whose worlds had violently collided. He found her mind to be as sharp as her tongue, her insights into human nature piercing his cynical armor. She saw patterns he missed, noticed subtleties in his men's behavior that his hardened gaze overlooked. "Luca," she said one night, her brow furrowed in concentration. "He never looks you in the eye when he agrees with you. He looks at your chair." At your throne, Marco had noticed, of course, but dismissed it as his cousin's obsequious nature. Coming from her, the observation landed with the weight of a prophecy. Their nights bled into one another, filled with whispered confessions and shared vulnerabilities. He told her of the betrayal by his own brother years ago, the act that had carved the scar on his face and forged the ice around his heart. She, in turn, spoke of her dreams of being an artist, a life stolen from her by her father's choices. In the shadows of his dangerous world, a fragile intimacy bloomed. One evening, as a storm raged outside, mirroring the tempest in their hearts, he found himself tracing the line of her jaw with his thumb. "You see things, Isabella," he murmured, his voice thick with an emotion he couldn't name. "You see the man, not the monster, perhaps?" she whispered back, her breath catching as his lips drew nearer. "They are one and the same." The kiss was not gentle. It was a clash of lightning and thunder, a desperate, hungry confirmation of an attraction that had simmered for too long. It was forbidden, reckless, and in that moment it was the only truth in either of their lives. But their burgeoning connection did not go unnoticed. Luca Vario watched them with a growing sense of alarm and opportunity. The shadow was in love. A king with a heart was a king with an Achilles heel. Luca began his endgame. He subtly planted a doctored document in Giovanni's office, a fake bank transfer that seemed to implicate the loyal consigliere. He then fed whispers to the heads of the 5 families, painting Marco as a weakened leader, distracted by a woman, losing his edge. He fanned the flames of old rivalries, orchestrating a series of small violent clashes that pushed the city to the brink of a turf war. His plan was simple and elegant. In the chaos of war, a king could fall, and a new one could rise from the ashes. His final move was the most venomous. He arranged for an anonymous tip to be sent to the Taviani family, Marco's most bitter rivals, detailing the layout of the villa and a crucial piece of information: the location of the king's whore. Isabella was no longer just a liability, she was the bait. The attack came without warning. The storm that had been brewing over the city finally broke, and under the cover of torrential rain and howling wind, the Taviani assassins swarmed the estate. But Marco was the shadow for a reason. He had felt the shift in the city's currents, and a single worried glance from Isabella hours earlier about Luca's overeager polishing of a silver letter opener had put him on high alert. It was a tiny detail, but it was enough. When the first alarm screamed, he didn't run for cover. He ran for her. He burst into her room just as 2 gunmen shattered her balcony doors. The ensuing firefight was a ballet of brutal violence. Marco moved through the space, his weapon an extension of his will, a harbinger of death. Isabella, instead of hiding, armed herself with a heavy marble lamp, her eyes blazing with the warrior spirit he had ignited in her. In the main hall, the battle raged. Giovanni, his loyalty absolute, threw himself in front of Marco, taking a bullet meant for his boss. He crumpled to the ground, his blood a stark crimson against the white marble floor. As the last Taviani gunman fell, a chilling silence descended, and from that silence Luca Vario emerged, a smug smile on his face and a gun in his hand, aimed directly at Marco's heart. "It's a shame, cousin," Luca sneered, his voice dripping with false regret. "You grew soft. All for a piece of street trash. But don't worry, I will take care of the family. And of her." He was savoring his moment of triumph, the monologue of the victorious usurper. But he had made the same mistake as all the others. He had underestimated Isabella. While his attention was on Marco, she moved. With a defiant cry, she hurled a priceless porcelain vase against the far wall. The shattering echo was a prearranged signal, a sound she and Marco had discussed, meant to alert his elite personal guard stationed outside. For a fraction of a second, Luca's eyes darted toward the sound. It was all the time Marco needed. He lunged, a wounded predator, and the crack of bone was louder than the gunshot that went wild into the ceiling. The gun clattered to the floor. Marco held his trembling, treacherous cousin by the throat, his face a mask of cold fury. He didn't grant him a quick death. "Il tradimento assai pega col sang," Marco rasped, the old words a sacred, terrible vow. Betrayal is paid with blood. He nodded to his guards, who dragged the whimpering Luca away to face the slow, meticulous justice of their world. The storm passed. The villa was quiet again, the scent of cordite and rain hanging in the air. Marco stood on the balcony, his arm bandaged, his body aching but his empire secure. Isabella came to stand beside him, the moonlight catching the silver of her tears. He was her captor, her protector, her lover. He had claimed her as a debt and found his redemption. "My world will always be this," he said, his voice heavy, gesturing to the city below. "A kingdom of beautiful, dangerous shadows. I can give you a new life. Money, a new name. Anywhere you want to go. You can be free." She looked at him, at the king who had been brought to his knees not by bullets, but by a flicker of compassion in a dark alley. She reached up and gently touched the scar on his cheek, the symbol of his old pain. "My freedom," she said, her voice clear and strong, "is not a place, Marco. It's you." He pulled her into his arms, burying his face in her hair, inhaling her scent of jasmine and defiance. In the heart of the monster she had found a man, and in the eyes of the captive, he had found his queen. Together they would rule his kingdom, not with fear, but with a love forged in blood and shadow, a testament to the idea that even in the darkest of nights, a single light can change everything. So I ask you, can a love born from such violence truly endure? Can a rose grown in a battlefield ever shed its thorns? Tell me what you believe. For in the world of shadows and secrets, the heart is the most unpredictable territory of all.